Good morning and welcome to Tony Sorrentino, legislative candidate from District 39. Thank you, Tony, for joining us for our virtual legislative candidate meetings. My name is Gina Ragland, and joining me today is Susan DeCamp, Volunteer State President, and Advocacy Lead volunteers Bob Lassen and Ira Nathan. Tony, we appreciate your taking time to meet with us and discuss issues of importance to the 50-plus voter and their families in Nebraska. As a reminder, the meeting is being recorded and will be shared with AARP members across your district prior to the election. So to start us off, Tony, if you want to maybe start by giving us a little background about yourself and your campaign, 5 minutes or less would be great. And then once we've completed your opening, we'll move quickly into the questions. So I'll pitch it back to you, Tony.
Well, thank you, Gina. Tony Sorrentino. I am not only a native Nebraskan, I'm a native Omahan. Educated here in Nebraska, Creighton University, undergraduate, Creighton University School of Law. By occupation, I'm a certified public accountant and an attorney. I spent the bulk of my career in the employee benefits arena, specifically as a owner and director of a company called Silverstone Group for about 33 years. Myself and my partner sold that company about 4.5 years ago. I stayed on for quite a while afterwards, and then a smaller practice with a couple of other insurance executives throughout the country. In addition to those duties, I'm an adjunct professor of law at Creighton University, where I teach a course on employee benefit law, specifically relating to health plans, and we study quite a bit in that area as far as Medicare, Medicaid, group health insurance plans. I am also a volunteer assistant coach for the Creighton University track and cross country teams. So I have a lot of exposure to Creighton University. Married for 43 years, 4 kids, 6 grandkids, and I'm really running for office based on the fact that I've been interested in doing this for a long time. Finally got the time after selling our practice that I could devote the kind of time and effort it needs to do this. It's a lot of people consider it a part-time job, but it's very, very much a full-time job, not only the sitting legislature, but the rest of the year. So I'm hoping to be successful and turn what is an interest into an opportunity to serve the district in the way I think they need to be served. My campaign's going well. I'm very much somebody who I feel like you have to go door to door on your own. I don't pay anybody to go door to door for me. Actually, use very few volunteers. It's all about understanding your district and getting to know the people who will be your constituents if you're elected. And I've gotten to most doors in the district with 53 or some days left. Hope to finish that up. And I think it's going well, but we'll find out on November 5th.
Great. Thank you, Tony, for the introduction. Thanks for sharing your background. Congrats on your kids. And 43 years of marriage is pretty amazing. So congrats on that as well.
I think you should congratulate my wife. She's the one who puts up with me.
I understand. We'll move into the question section here. And like I said, we'll keep these short so we can, have a conversation with you. But we have provided you with a set of 3 questions pertaining to the 50 plus in Nebraska. Again, these are issues that we're hearing from our members, and that's why we're bringing them to the table for discussion. Okay. Looking to allot about 5 minutes for each question if possible. So our first question is on health, caregiving, and home and community-based care. And Ira Nathan's going to take that. So go ahead, Ira.
And Gina, you just want the questions, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, Tony. What would you do to protect and or expand the home and community-based programs? Particularly, we're interested in recruitment and retention of sufficient workforce and adequate funding for programs and services that older Nebraskans and their families rely on. And our second part of this is what will you do to support the 179,000 unpaid family caregivers in Nebraska?
Okay, thank you. Good questions. It's easier for me to relate to this maybe than some candidates since I have achieved that age. My practice has been for 35 years in healthcare. And I do understand the healthcare world from the standpoint of insurance and federal programs and state programs. And, we talk a lot about how expensive they are. Well, they are expensive, but having the ability to treat some of our older folks in their homes is not only so much more inexpensive, but also important to those people. Having your home environment, whether that's with a spouse or without or kids, uh, is a higher quality of care and a higher quality of life than they're ever going to achieve in some of the facilities, whether paid or unpaid. So I take that to heart, that that's the place we want to treat them. It's the most economic play. I also understand the difficulty in recruiting and retaining those folks. They're not particularly highly paid, but they're charged with a lot of responsibility, and it's a very important responsibility. I know that having served on the Metropolitan Community College Board for 4 years, I know that there are institutions who want to do this training and do a good job of it, but we need to expand those programs. And if that takes state funding, that takes state funding. I don't know what we can do as far as, the incentive to pay or pay more. Sometimes that's up to private industry, but, if approached at the state level, with a solid plan of here's what we can do to make those workers more available, how we can pay them more. I certainly want to listen. One of the committees, and I know you don't have, wherewithal to say this is the committee I'm going to serve on, but one of the 2 or 3 I would request would actually be HHS. I have a lot of experience in the state Medicaid program, Medicare, and the health insurance field as general. I don't know that I would go so far as to say, if there's a cost to this training, and there is, could there be some sort of state funding for that or tuition reimbursement? I would at least want to look into that. So I guess not being elected, those would be my concerns.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you for asking the question, Ira. Moving on then, our second question comes from Susan DeCamp, and it's addressing consumer fraud, exploitation, and protections. So go ahead, Susan.
Good morning, Tony. Nice to have you with us today. My question, consumers lose billions of dollars each year to online, financial, property, and other types of fraud. What will you do to ensure that Nebraskans are protected against fraud and deceptive business practices and provide opportunities for redress to victims of fraud? Would you support enacting laws to require merchants that sell gift cards to post notices? Would you support enactment of a consumer fraud restitution fund? And would you support implementation of preventative measures to assist in combating owner and seller housing impersonation fraud?
The simple answer would be yes, yes, and yes. The third one is particularly important to me only because I've had a chance to review other states' laws that, especially with home ownership and people actually losing their home to fraud. And my personal opinion is Nebraska is not doing enough in that particular area. I can't even remember the vein it came up in, but I had a chance to review 3 or 4 states' different laws. It may have been from talking with one of the current state senators. I don't recall off the top of my head. We need particular emphasis in that area. And as far as registering companies and the credit cards, et cetera, I think it's good common sense. There's some of our older folks maybe aren't as savvy. They don't work in areas where they have virus protection and education and training. In my firm, every one of our employees had to go once a month through a detection program that said, these are the kind of things we think you're going to be seeing, not to click on, what to do with them. Folks that are retired don't get to do that. So any training in addition to those 3 questions you ask, I think, is a viable alternative, if you will, for someone in our state to be trained on. And we need to work. I'm not even frankly sure it could probably hit 2 or 3 different committees at the state legislative level. That would be something I'd have to look into, but certainly support all of those measures. And thank you for the question.
Great, and thank you for sharing your thoughts on that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Tony. And yeah, thanks for your, especially number 3 on deed fraud is kind of an
Mhm.
area we're looking to explore in the next legislative session on doing some work there. So we'll definitely be loving to have further conversations with you as you get to the legislature. So thanks for your interest in that.
Thank you. I hope to get there.
Absolutely. Our last question then is, now we're going to switch over to more of a livable communities, keeping people in their homes, affordable housing. So Bob Lassen's going to take that. So go ahead, Bob.
Thank you for being here and sharing your time.
Thank
My
you.
question is two-phased. One has to do with zoning, and the other one has to do with homestead exemption. Nebraskans over 65 are the fastest growing segment of our population, and research shows that most of those people want to remain in their homes and communities as they age. As housing costs continue to increase, older Americans are unable to find housing to meet their needs when they're seeking to downsize, and thus are being pushed out of communities and homes that they have lived in for generations. What will you do to support, incentivize, and ensure creation of affordable housing, diverse housing options such as accessory dwelling units, intergenerational housing, manufactured housing units, and townhouses? Excuse me. The second part of the question was, will you fight to ensure that the homestead exemption program is maintained and protected to ensure the older Nebraskans that qualify continue to have access to this tax program that allows them to age in place?
Thank you for the question. And if you don't mind, I'm going to answer the second part first. As a CPA, I've done a lot of tax work. I'm very familiar with the homestead exemption in the state of Nebraska. Sadly, that homestead exemption is clearly in need of updating and expanding. It wasn't very sufficient to begin with. And one of the suggestions I would have had I been in the legislature when we were looking from the revenue committee standpoint, and what do we do with property taxes, which is very often one of the reasons people are ejected from their home. Their homes are paid for and their taxes keep going up, is expansion of that. And what I would have suggested is a program that you borrow from, the retirement plan industry, a rule of 85 or a rule of 80 or a rule of 90, where you take a taxpayer's home who's lived in Nebraska for a specified period of time, take their age plus the number of years that they have owned a principal residence in Nebraska. And once that reaches a number, let's just say 85, you've had a house for 20 years, you're 65 years old, your home is exempt from property taxes, period, or at least a vast reduction. That would ensure most people getting to stay in their houses. I know it doesn't sound like a lot to have $4,000 or $5,000 of real estate tax to some people, but if they're on a limited income, and now many people's Social Security is taxed, that's the reason they're being ejected from their houses. So immediately a review of that homestead exemption, and that needs to be updated. As far as other opportunities, whether it's group homes or the things that were mentioned earlier in the question, honestly, I don't know a lot about those alternatives, but I think it bears looking at it closely. My particular district is, frankly, almost being overrun with apartments. And a lot of it is because of the low interest rates that are now gone. They're 7%, and the younger folks can't afford to buy houses. Well, that affects older folks as well when they leave their larger dwelling and try to downsize. I don't know the answer to that, but we need to look at the alternatives that may be more apt for senior rather than, your younger college graduates. And I certainly support and want a chance to review those kind of regulations.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. And we have we do a lot of work in the housing arena, especially affordable with accessory dwelling units and that sort of thing. And again, when you get to the legislature, we'll love to sit down and have some conversations with you about some of those options, because they really do expand the ability for older people to live in lower levels of care as long as they can in their homes. So thank you for your comments on that as well.
I appreciate the opportunity to be educated on it.
Absolutely. And that's how we learn. We learn from each other. So as we make laws. So thank you for that. We are coming to the end of our meeting time. And again, to be respectful of your time, I want to give you just a few minutes to do a closing about what your priorities are for serving in the legislature, or if you have any specific issues you plan to work on to address during your time as a state senator. So Tony, I'll give you some time back to close things out.
I'll just do a couple of things. I mean, my experience is obviously it's in the insurance arena and all things medical, Medicaid, et cetera. So I want to pay close attention to a couple of things. Number one, making sure that our insurance laws are not being overly invasive and we have good broad terminology. The medical arena is important in Nebraska, especially in Omaha. It's a creator of a lot of jobs. And I want this to be a good place for good providers to work here. We have very low, in my opinion, medical malpractice limits, which makes it a favorable place for doctors and makes it a favorable place for insurers. I want that business to thrive, especially as we all age. We need that. Secondarily, I really want to focus on the property tax issues. I know the special session didn't get a lot done. And I think it would be a lot easier if I just said this in general about my campaign. Nebraska thrives and Nebraska is a better place when we start putting the state before a political party. We listen. We have 2 ears, 1 mouth. People don't understand that. We reach across the aisle, and that will create a situation where we might find common ground. There's this diversity of political party, and it means everything. Nobody wants to listen to anybody. They're worried about, who has the majority and are we, free from any types of collusion, if you will, in the legislature. Let's put that aside. Everybody can learn from everybody. And that's what I learned in 40 years of business. Open our minds, shut our mouths.
Thank you so much, Tony. Thank you again for taking the time to visit with us. We wish you the best with your campaign. Again, thank you for meeting with AARP today. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And thank you for accommodating my schedule today. Apologize.
Absolutely.
Thank you,
Have a great
Tony.
day. Take care.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
meeting you,
Bye.
Tony. Bye.
Thank you.